Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, my name is Helen. I'm one of the careers consultants from Newcastle University Career Service. So I work really closely with students in both one-to-one and group work settings. I also work especially closely with students who study chemistry. So if you're going to study chemistry at Newcastle University, our paths may well just cross when you start your studies here. Firstly, delighted to be hosting today's Partners Industry webinar. So delighted to have our chemistry graduates from Newcastle University. The way that the session is going to work today, so firstly, I'll hand over to Francesca. She'll give you an overview about her studies, studying at Newcastle University, and then she'll talk a little bit more about what she's been getting up to since she graduated. And then we'll hand over to Hannah, and Hannah will do the same as well. So both Francesca and Hannah have got short presentations to deliver this afternoon. Once our alumni have delivered their slides, the remainder of the session will be time for questions and answers. So that's it from me for now. So without further ado, I will hand over firstly to Francesca.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Helen. Okay, so hello everyone. Nice to meet you all virtually. So as Helen said, my name is Francesca, and I was a chemistry graduate at Newcastle University not that long ago. So I was that unfortunate year that graduated in 2020 during the pandemic. But today I wanted to present my journey from A-levels to industry, kind of give you a little snippet of, how I decided to go to Newcastle, my experience there, and then ultimately how my degree led on to where I am now at a chemical and sustainable technology company called Johnson Matthey. So first of all, just like many of you, I guess my first step was completing my A-levels. So as it says on the screen, I did A-levels in chemistry, maths, geography, and dance. And I think the nice thing about my selection of A-levels and something that I want to highlight is that particularly at Newcastle within chemistry, I found that everyone has quite a different background when it comes to A-levels. And so, you might not get typically the 3 sciences, and that's totally okay. You don't necessarily need them. Obviously, you need whatever's agreed within your offer, but sometimes a varied background can also help you. And also, it's nice to then pursue different interests outside of your studies at uni through society and things like that. So, completed my A-levels in 2017 and then moved on to Newcastle University, which I put as my firm choice. And the reason for that is that I went around lots of different universities and, quite like different ones for different reasons. But ultimately, I don't know if you can tell by my accent, but I am from the northeast of England. And obviously Newcastle's fairly close to home. It's about an hour away. So it was convenient enough for me to live away, have some freedom, but then also be connected to home. And in addition to that, I just felt that it was a very friendly environment. I felt very welcome when I visited, and I kind of knew that I would be comfortable to study there and do well. So started my studies in 2017, and I applied for the straight chemistry BSc course. So I opted not to do medicinal chemistry whilst I was at the university, but had a great time, thoroughly enjoyed my time there. Mix of kind of, spending time in the labs, working with a partner, kind of really getting into the nitty-gritty of experiments, all the way to doing, some kind of really theoretical chemistry, which I really enjoyed. And then in terms of whilst I was at university, I also got involved with other things within the chemistry department. So I was a student ambassador. So I showed prospective students just like yourself around the university. I was a peer mentor for students in younger years. And I think all of that just sort of really added up to my university experience and really kind of showcased why I enjoyed chemistry at Newcastle so much. So I pretty much knew from quite early on that I wanted to just do 3 years and do a bachelor's. And the reason for that is I just sort of really wanted to get into industry and start working. And so between my second and third year at the university, I applied for a range of summer placements. And I spent the summer at AstraZeneca, which I'm sure you've all heard of, particularly after the pandemic. And I spent time at their site in Macclesfield in the northwest of England, where I worked as an analytical scientist doing some method development. And this was such a great experience because this was my first taste of industry and, being able to compare how things worked at university, but seeing it in real life, the differences in the labs, you see what you learn at university and then you see people talking about it within industry, and that's a really nice, rewarding feeling. And I also met a lot of lovely people who were on a similar journey to me during that time. And I think that really sort of lit the fire in my belly to want to go back to university, do my final year, and then ultimately pursue a career in industry as quick as possible. So I then went back to university to complete my final year at the start of September 2019. And I applied for a range of different jobs in terms of graduate jobs and graduate schemes, ultimately with the idea that I wanted to start my career in industry in a lab. And so I landed a job at Johnson Matthey, which, if you haven't heard of it, is as I mentioned before, a chemical and sustainable technology company. And Johnson Matthey often supplies chemicals or technologies to other chemical companies that are a little bit further along the product chain. So, for example, the companies that, fuel for your cars. We do catalytic converters for a lot of car manufacturers that you'll know the names of, things to do with consumer goods, so your shampoo bottles, all of that sort of stuff. That's where Johnson Matthey plays, and it's quite a large company that has multiple different sectors that work in different areas of the chemical industry. And so I joined Johnson Matthey on something called their Global Graduate Programme. And within this programme, there are 3 different streams you can choose from. So operations, commercial, or science. I picked science, obviously, with wanting to go into a lab. And the idea is that between 2020 and 2022, I would do 3 8-month rotations or different placements across the UK. And every 8 months, I would change from a different job, a different location, a different manager, a different team. So it really gave me that breadth of experience to understand how different sectors, even within the chemical industry, work, and sort of what's needed and what I'm most interested in. So it was almost like a trial run for my first few years in industry, which has been great. So within that, as I said, I started off in the lab. So I was a research scientist and I studied catalysis, so homogeneous catalysis. And that was looking at around applications for that sort of, pharmaceutical healthcare goods sector. I then moved to Cambridge. So sorry, that first rotation was in Teesside in the northeast. I then moved to Cambridge middle of last year to work on solid form science within pharmaceuticals. So there I got to work with some of the big pharma companies and kind of help towards their production or release of new APIs and treatments and medicines. And then I also worked as a data scientist. So this is quite unusual because you think science and you also always don't think data, but data is becoming really prominent within kind of the chemical industry and chemistry in general. And so I was looking at ways to sort of streamline experimental plans or perform more in-depth analysis of your experimental results, and then looking at how that could help the company to kind of maximize production or just basically increase innovation. I then, after that, decided to kind of take a more commercial turn within the company. So my 2 roles currently, I'm a project manager. So I'm actually project managing a release or a proposal for a sustainability initiative for the company. So focusing on how we can kind of build a cleaner and healthier world. And then I'm also currently undertaking a role where I'm a market analyst. So I'm looking at the petrochemical landscape and seeing where my company could access new opportunities in terms of business or, establishing new customer relationships. So that's a little bit about my role, but I wanted to highlight some key experiences. So key learning experiences in terms of university and in terms of my job now and going into industry. I think the first thing for me is I'm one of those people that if I don't, if I come out of a lecture and I don't necessarily understand something, it frustrates me. But in reality, I think you learn pretty quickly that things don't always click first time. It might not even click a week after that lecture, and that's okay. It's just knowing, what resources you need and who you need to speak to make it click. And obviously the university guides you with that. So that's the first thing. Build a broad network. So I know we've shared our LinkedIn profiles, but kind of making a LinkedIn account and writing your experiences on there and showing to sort of other companies that you're open to look for opportunities is really important once you start university. It's quite often how these amazing opportunities come about, and you get to learn and follow what different industrial companies are doing if you're interested. Always ask for feedback. Sometimes feedback's not nice to hear, but it's the only way to improve. And obviously, if it is nice, then it's really rewarding and gives you that boost to kind of carry on with what you're doing. And then that classic thing of nothing's a stupid question. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's fine. You'll quite often find that, particularly in lectures or when you're working in smaller groups and tutorials, everyone will be thinking the same thing. If, say, there's something that's not particularly clear, and you asking that question will kind of help everyone in that room to further their understanding as well. So there's no such thing as a stupid question. My top tips for university would be obviously have fun. For many of you, it might be the first time you move away from home, you're living in a different environment, meeting new people. And I think, to make the most of that, definitely stay organised. It's pretty easy if you don't keep an eye on it, for things to pile up. So stay organised, schedule those 2 hours in to do some work before you go on your night out or you go to your society or whatever it may be. Joining a society is really good. Often it's nice to have a hobby, to have a release from your studies and, have focus on something else. Personally, I joined the dance society whilst I was at Newcastle University, which I really enjoyed. And then also find a study space that works for you, whether it's your bedroom, a library, kind of what are the social spaces within the university. For me, it was the Marjorie Robinson Library at Newcastle that I just spent lots of time in and kind of had this little corner that I loved to sit in and I could zone out and do my work. But I think it's really important to kind of feel comfortable with the studies. So that's me, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Francesca. That was fantastic, and I think so kind of really interesting to see that journey from A-level choices right through to your experiences right now at Johnson Matthey. And I think what's really interesting, and hopefully for our partner students to see, is that you've worked in so many different roles already within 2 years of graduation. Yes, that's within the same company, but you've had the chance to do a lab-based role that maybe links very directly with your chemistry, but equally you're really starting to gain that business mind. And I think the point that you're making about the data science and that kind of crossover with other STEM subjects is really interesting. And the fact that for yourselves as students soon to be studying at Newcastle University, the world and the job market is changing all the time, and it's going to be your responsibility as students to try and adapt to that. And that's what we're here to help you with, not just through the career service, but through your academic courses as well. So really interesting to hear a little bit more about your history, but equally, some very sound advice. So thanks again to Francesca. We'll come back to you again in the Q&A session towards the end of the session. So now moving on. So I'm delighted again to be introducing Hannah. So Hannah has contributed to these partners webinars before, like Francesca has, I think, as well. So delighted that she's agreed to come back and speak to you all today also. So Hannah works for an organisation called Croda, and similarly to Francesca, joined Croda on their graduate programme, and perhaps I won't say any more so that I don't steal everything that you're about to say too, Hannah. So I'll hand over to you now, Hannah.
Thank you, Helen. So yeah, I'm Hannah and I went to Newcastle Uni. When did I go? 2015 to 2019. So I'll just take you through a bit of, my past, and I'll kind of add my hints and tips along the way. So yeah, I went digging for some old photos for you all so you can have a little laugh at little old Hannah. So yeah, like all of you obviously went through primary school, secondary school, and probably if you'd asked me then whether I would be a scientist, whether I would have class myself as a scientist, I would probably have said no. I think it was kind of when I got to A level, which is that photo in the middle with my A level chemistry class, that I started to think, oh yeah, I quite like chemistry. Think maybe it'd be nice to do a degree in this. I think it opens doors. It's quite a broad degree that you could go on and do all sorts with. And I was always, people always laugh at me because I always say that the thing that got me into chemistry was when I was in the shower, I always used to look on the back of my shampoo bottles and look at all the ingredients in it and think, oh, I'd love to know why they're in there and what they're doing to my hair and stuff like that. And that's where kind of, my spark for chemistry and particularly personal care came in. And I'll explain a bit more about that in a second. So at A level, I did chemistry, maths and geography, and I did an AS level in music. And then went on to Newcastle University to do my MChem in chemistry. So it was a 4-year course, but in my 3rd year, I was out in industry doing my industrial training year. And then, that photo on the end is me at Croda a few years ago. So during my time at Newcastle, my chemistry degree was a massive part of my time there. That's the reason I was there. But obviously, along the way, you make amazing friends. I was saying to Helen just before you all joined the call that I'm actually in Newcastle this weekend visiting some of my friends. So they're friends for life, and it's an amazing opportunity to meet people from all across the country, all across the world even. And then I was also a student ambassador, like Francesca was. So I would help on open days and hopefully show Newcastle off and get people to come and join the university and love it as much as we all did. And then I was also a part of the Wind Band Society. So again, like Francesca, I would really recommend joining a society. It was just something else, a bit different. That was it. None of my course friends, none of my other friends did wind band. So it meant I'd got my little outlet to meet other people and do my thing and stuff like that. So that was a nice little addition to my time at Newcastle. So during my time in my degree, I like I said, in my 3rd year, I did an industrial placement year, and this was at a company called Croda. So Croda are the name behind lots of ingredients and technologies that are used in so many brands. So in Boots No. 7 products, for example, there's an anti-aging product in there called Matrixyl, and that is a Croda product. We make all sorts of ingredients for all sorts of applications, mainly being within consumer care. So this comprises of beauty care products, so things for cosmetics, skincare, sun care, hair care, that sort of thing, as well as home care. So we have things that go into laundry detergents and fabric softeners and that sort of thing. And we also have our life sciences business. So we have ingredients that go into crop care applications, so to help us get more crops from our fields, as well as healthcare, so things that go into vaccines and drugs and stuff like that. That little 3 boxes on the right hand side kind of shows where Croda operates. So we make the raw materials that then we sell to companies that make things like your Dove hand wash and your Nivea sun cream and stuff like that, and then they're the products that you then see on the shelves. So you would never see Croda's name on the shelf, but we're in so many products that you guys will use every day. We have a little stat where before 10 o'clock in the morning you will use 10 Croda products. We're in all sorts of things. So during my industrial placement year at Croda, I was in the sun care synthesis and applications team. So I was kind of across 2 teams. And this was at their site in what we call the Croda Ditton site, which is in Widnes in Cheshire. But I actually lived in Liverpool for that year. So it was a great opportunity to leave Newcastle, move to a different city that I didn't know, make friends, just do something completely different, and I absolutely loved every minute of it. So the main project I was working on when I was there was developing this new ingredient that protected in the IR range of the spectrum. So sun creams typically absorb in the UV part of the spectrum, because we know that UV rays damage our skin, and that's why we get burning and we get aging of the skin. But there was also new data out that showed that infrared rays could harm your skin as well. So Croda wanted to bring out a product that would meet that newfound data and protect our skin from the IR rays. And so my whole project for my time there was developing this new ingredient that we then called Infraveil IT100. So it's a current Croda product. It's on Croda's website. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh, that was my little brainchild and my baby for the year. So yeah, it was really satisfying when it launched and everything like that. So I got to do synthesis work, applications work. So that's when I actually put it into sun creams and tested that it did what we said it would do. And then I went down onto plan and I saw it being scaled up and all that sort of thing. So I got amazing experience during that year. And that's what really drove me to want to go back to Croda. I loved working for them, and I really didn't want to leave at the end of my year to come back to university. But then I knew as soon as I came back, I wanted to apply to go back again. And so then thankfully, Croda said, yes, they would have me back. So I joined their graduate scheme back in September 2019, so just before the pandemic. And my first rotation was in what we call performance technologies, which is an area of the Croda business. And I was in my white coat and my glasses every day, working in the lab. And I was working on all sorts of things. So looking at lubricants to go into ships, and looking at additives to go into wind turbines to mean they last longer. And then I was also doing things like washing studies on clothes using our additives that go into fabric conditioners and all sorts. So yeah, that was a really varied rotation, all in the lab, in our labs in Yorkshire. And then second rotation, I decided I wanted to try something a bit different and do something more commercial, so outside of the lab. And I guess it kind of worked out quite well, because I would have been at a desk anyway, but then obviously with the pandemic at that time, it meant that I worked from home. So my manager, he was in the US, I was in the UK, I was working at home because of COVID. It was a bit of a crazy rotation, but it was amazing, and I learned so much, and I really enjoyed doing much more of the commercial side of things rather than being in the lab. And then at the end of that rotation, I thought I was going to go on to rotation number 3 and start my digital sales and marketing role, where I was going to be moving to Sweden. But on a crazy Monday, I got asked by one of our directors at work whether I would go over to Alabama in the US for 5 months to support the production of ingredients that we make that go into the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. So when I was asked that, I, without hesitation, really was like, yes, I want to go. It's amazing. It's one of those things. And again, this is a tip I would give you all for life, is if you ever get an opportunity like that, just say yes. It opens so many doors, and I had the summer of a lifetime. I was working hard, but probably playing even harder. So yeah, it's amazing, and you have to do these crazy things in life. So while I was over there, I was a production coordinator in our pharmaceutical GMP environment. So I'll explain that a bit. So GMP stands for good manufacturing practice. And when you make pharmaceutical ingredients, you don't have to, but the majority of pharmaceuticals are made in a GMP environment. And this just means that they're certified, kind of, they've been made properly and to the correct standards and everything like that. And to be sold as GMP pharmaceutical ingredients, you have to do a lot of paperwork that allow that. And so essentially a lot of my role was making sure that all this paperwork was completed so that our ingredients could go out the door to Pfizer, and Pfizer could put them in the COVID vaccine. So the reason why they needed to send more of us over was because our ingredients were the limiting component of how fast Pfizer could manufacture their vaccine. So we really needed to ramp up production wherever we could and get those ingredients to them even faster. So yeah, me and 9 of my British colleagues were shipped over to them to help out, and it was amazing. And I loved the job. It was a job that I never thought I would enjoy, but I loved it, and it's definitely shaped where I see my career going forward. And then once I had done my stint in Alabama and came back to the UK, I then started my role that, as I was meant to before I went, in digital sales and marketing, supporting our Scandinavian team. So I was meant to move to Sweden for the rotation, but because of Brexit and COVID and stuff, I ended up doing the rotation in the UK, but working with the team in Sweden and traveling there a couple of times as well to support. So this role was much more hands-on contact with customers. So I was on Croda's live chat function. So if you go on the Croda website, you can live chat with some of our people in the office, and one of those people was me, and I was helping the customers finding their solutions that they needed. And then I also helped with things like digital marketing, which again is something that I'd never done before, but is a great skill that I've learned along the way. So yeah, those photos on the slide are just a few of the things I've got to do. So that with the tree is some of us guys that went to Alabama, they planted a tree for us guys that went, just as a little thank you and a memory that will always be there. And then the other two pictures are on some of our residentials that we do on the graduate scheme, where you develop different skills. So yeah, we did caving, and we did kind of problem solving things, and high ropes courses and all sorts. So it's been a really fun experience. So I finished the scheme officially in April, and from the 1st of May I have a brand new job. So at the end of the scheme, I kind of reflected on all the things that I wanted in a job, the things that I'd enjoyed from the scheme, and hopefully that I could feed into a new job. And this green box is the things that I kind of highlighted that I knew I would quite like. So something outside of the lab that involved kind of coordinating, because I really enjoyed my coordinating part when I was in Alabama. Something that involved communicating and being people orientated. I'm very much like a people person and enjoy doing all that type of thing. And I also would like opportunities to travel, having got the bug from kind of Alabama and Sweden and things like that. So at the end of the scheme, I got approached by one of the senior managers in the company, and they offered me the change communications coordinator role within our business change team. So something that I never thought I'd do, but the business change team we've got lots of projects going on at Croda, and we have a team that are essentially managing this change. So we have project managers and stuff like that are making sure all these key projects get sorted and come to fruition and get delivered correctly. But one area they identified that they needed more help with was the communications side. So it was okay, the project managers delivering the project, but if no one's on board with the project or no one knows what's going on, it doesn't come to anything. The projects just kind of fall flat. So they needed someone to help with the communication side and making sure that people were aware of the projects and bought in, so that when they are delivered, they kind of go off with a bang and they don't just fall flat. So that's where my new role comes in. So it kind of encompasses everything that I had in that green box there into this brand new role. So I'm very much just finding my feet with it at the moment, but I'm really excited to see where it goes. So yeah, that's me. And yeah, let's go to questions, Helen, and see what people have got.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I think that thanks for sort of describing the various roles that you've had in a lot of detail. I think that was really useful, hopefully, for the students that are with us today to understand, again, just the breadth of experiences that both of you have had within one company, and that opportunity to move across different areas and to gain more experience. And obviously the fact that you've had that international experience in the US, which was completely unexpected and a bit of a curveball, but that experience has kind of changed your career direction and kind of made you realise actually where you want to be within the company. So that's fantastic. And I think myself and probably everyone else on the call today are going to be reading those shampoo bottles later and trying to figure out which of the ingredients are Croda products. Probably quite a few of them.
Quite a few, yeah. No, I still do it now, and it's even worse now, because I'll go into Boots and I'll be like, oh, I think we're in that product, and then I'll go and I'll look at the stuff. So yeah, a trip into Boots is never a quick little trip anymore.
Thank you so much to Francesca and to Hannah. So I can see we've had some fantastic questions come through already. So I'll start off with the first question that came through, that was from Klaus. So Klaus was interested to know, do you prefer the practical elements of chemistry or the theory more? So perhaps thinking more about your academic experience at Newcastle studying chemistry. Perhaps I'll come to you first, Francesca. What did you prefer?
I definitely preferred the practical side of things. I think so. When I was younger, I would try and kind of make like perfumes in the garden with like petal flowers and, water and stuff. And it's a bit of a strange hobby as a child, but I think that being in the lab is kind of similar. You learn about things in your lectures, which is great. But for me, I'm a visual learner. So being able to take what I've learned, creating something, and then physically seeing your product, one, that's quite nice, when you come out of labs and your product's what it's supposed to be and it's nice and it's looking great. But then also just, the style of working you develop in the lab, it's very logical and methodical, and you kind of learn all the reasoning as you go along. So definitely practical for me.
Yeah. How about you, Hannah? Practical or theory, or a bit of both?
Probably a bit of both, but I would say the beauty of the practical side, and I think this is it's not unique to a chemistry course, but it's the courses that have that practical element, you end up being much more friendly with people on your course because you've done practical things and you're not just sat in a lecture with them. So I would definitely say, because the friends I'm coming back to see this weekend in Newcastle were from my chemistry course, and I think I got such good friends with them because you did those practical classes and stuff like that. So I definitely say it's a great way to make friends and get help from people on your course as well. Because, and I think obviously, like I said before, with me being very much a people person, that's what I prefer doing, and getting to know people and chatting things through rather than necessarily studying on your own all the time. So yeah, I think I'd agree with Francesca.
Yeah, and I think perhaps just to add to what Francesca and Hannah have said is that the chemistry curriculum has changed a little bit since Francesca and Hannah were sort of studying with us, and there are actually quite a lot of opportunities for students to engage with industry as part of your course. So we have a module in the second year of the undergraduate programme and the third year of the undergraduate programme where companies come in and they set a challenge, could be a problem that they have, and they get groups of students to sort of work together in teams to come up with a solution to that problem. So that's a really, really good opportunity to apply your theoretical knowledge from your chemistry, but equally, apply that in a very practical situation to a real life sort of problem or challenge that an employer is facing as well. So lots of opportunities to get that mix within your course too. So I can see the questions are flying in now, which is brilliant. A question for Hannah from Jodie. What would you recommend more, Hannah, the industrial training year or a year abroad? So Jodie's really interested in what you were talking about with Croda, looking to go into the cosmetics field herself, and she loves sun cream, you'll be pleased to hear.
Yeah, that's great to know. I'm definitely that person that tells everyone to wear sun cream all the time. So yes. What would I recommend more? Probably, for me, I always knew that I wanted to do an industrial placement year. The reason being, I was like, if I can get experience now, it's going to make finding a job upon graduation so much easier, particularly because I knew kind of in first and second year of uni that I was quite interested in cosmetics and wanted to try something like that. And I was like, it'd be great to kind of get a trial run at that by doing a placement year in that sort of thing and seeing if it is what I really like, and then it'll make it easier when I do graduate and look for a job. So for me, a year abroad, it wasn't I didn't consider it. It was just I knew that I wanted to do a year in industry more. I've got friends that did year abroad and they loved it. The only thing I would say is I personally don't know. I don't think that it helps your career prospects as much as a year in industry would. I think it's great experience and it's a great opportunity. But I think if you're looking for it to help you, give you that leg up, what kind of at the end of your degree when you're fighting with everyone else who's got a chemistry degree, the people that have the year in industry definitely found things a little bit easier, I might say, to get a job. But yeah, the cosmetics feels great. I love Croda. I love kind of relating to everything that I can do, and yeah, playing with cosmetics and stuff like that. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that as a field that maybe people don't necessarily think of when they think of chemistry as well.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for being so candid there as well. I guess from the perspective of somebody working in careers, I'd say again, both equally valuable, and it might depend on where you are when you're in stage 2 and the kind of experience that you want to get out of, you know, a year out. And I guess also important to sort of note that, you know, a year abroad, a year in industry isn't for everyone. So like Francesca was saying, she knew that she wanted to get into industry as quickly as possible, so made the most of the summer experience after her second year to really sort of make sure that she got that industrial experience. So it doesn't always have to be a year. Even if you do a shorter period of work experience with an employer, that's still going to be really valuable. Maybe a bit of a side question for Francesca, sort of linked to that. I guess, Francesca, you mentioned obviously you're due to move to Reading, but you're in the Northeast now, and you're from the Northeast as well. Was that always your intention to stay in the Northeast, or was that just an opportunity presented itself to you and you took it?
Yeah, so as Helen said, from the Northeast, and I think, you know, I didn't move too far for university, and I am very much of a home bird. Like, all of my friends and family are here, and I'm very lucky that Johnson Matthey have a site in Teesside, so I have been able to spend the majority of my first 2 years in industry in Teesside. But as Hannah mentioned, sometimes, you know, opportunities come along and they're so great that you say yes. And I think particularly, you know, when you're younger and you have a bit more flexibility, you might have less commitments. Now's the time to try something new. And so I was offered a job in Reading to start in September. I actually found this out yesterday. And so I'll be moving in September to still within Johnson Matthey, but a different role. And that role is more kind of relationship building and looking at strategy and sort of project management. So a lot of the things that Hannah said about, you know, her green box and what she wanted to incorporate into her role, I feel like I followed somewhat of a similar path. So that's quite interesting.
Francesca, so hot off the press that you're moving to Reading, exclusive for all of our partner students. Fantastic. I'll move on to some more questions in the chat. Ethan, you've asked a brilliant question. I'll probably come back to you at the end, just because it could be a really nice question to ask just towards the end of the session. So a couple of questions sort of relating more, I guess, to sort of that first year and those initial sort of few months or years perhaps at university. So did either of you know what you wanted to do when you first arrived at Newcastle Uni, or did you sort of figure it out along the way? Maybe come to Hannah perhaps first for this one.
I would say that I definitely knew that I was interested in personal care, cosmetics, that sort of thing, but how to get where I wanted to be, I had no idea. And it's funny actually. So I was looking for industrial placements that kind of would allow me to explore cosmetics and that sort of thing. And one of my best friends at uni, she'd done a week's work experience at Croda when she was in sixth form, and it was her that mentioned Croda to me. And then I went on the website and they had an industrial placement, and if she hadn't mentioned to me about them, I don't know whether I would be here right now in Croda. So it's funny how things have this way of working out, but I think I kind of knew that's what I wanted. But then if you'd have asked me now, if you'd have asked me back then what I'm going to be doing now, I would not have said that I'm going to be in a change communications role, having been to Alabama and not be in the lab and stuff like that. So, and it's okay not to know. I'm quite happy not knowing where I want to be or that kind of thing. I know it's scary at the time, but honestly, just embrace it, and whatever feels right at the time, just explore it.
Francesca, is there anything you'd like to add based on what Hannah's just mentioned?
So I would say I was the flip side. I knew I liked chemistry, but I didn't know particularly what within the chemical industry I wanted to go to. Was that, you know, like oil and gas? Was it sustainable technology? Was it something more like Hannah? Was it farm? I honestly had no clue. And in all honesty, even when I applied for summer placements and jobs at the end, I obviously had ideas of where I'd like to go for other companies, but I applied for a whole range. And I think the reason why I went for this rotational grad scheme at GEM is because over those 2 years, I would get a snippet of all of these different bits and, you know, really sort of consolidate in my mind where my interests lied within the chemical industry. So again, just trialing things, and, you know, sometimes you may have an experience and you may not like it, but that is just as valuable to rule it out than it is to have an experience and love it, because realistically you can't like everything. So
Are you sure you don't want to be a careers consultant, Francesca? That's exactly the kind of advice that we would advise as well. So, you know, it's university in itself is such a fantastic time to gain different experiences. And if you like it, great, that might help you figure out where you might want to go afterwards. But if you don't like it, that helps you understand, you know, where not to perhaps dedicate your time and your energy as well. And equally, it's still going to provide you with valuable experience to talk about on your CV and in applications as well. Still loads of questions and questions within questions in the chat as well. So maybe I'll kind of leave it with you, Francesca, for this one. So looking back, perhaps reflecting a little bit on your university experience, what would you suggest our students who are here today, what do you suggest they do at this stage or within the next year or so perhaps to improve their career prospects?
So when you are looking for a job, particularly with industry or to be honest, anywhere, you often have something called like a competency-based interview. And that will be a time where they say, okay, give me an example of a time where you've made a difficult decision or how you overcame a challenge. And so now, obviously, I have this portfolio of industrial experience to talk about, but I didn't have that when I went for my summer placement at AstraZeneca, and still not really when I went for my job at GEM. So the things I relied on was, whilst I was doing my A-levels, I had 4 years retail experience, right? Completely somewhat irrelevant to the chemical industry, but I had examples purely just because I had a job from like the ages of 16 to 19. I danced growing up, and I would sometimes teach younger children to dance. So give me a time where you showed leadership. So there's all of these different things, and you know, individually you'll all have your own experiences of whether it's extracurricular activities, work. So making the most of those things that run alongside your studies, and kind of really thinking about the opportunities that you can take from them. So that's what I'd say. So, you know, even your societies at Newcastle, being a chemistry ambassador like myself and Hannah, things like that.
Great advice, and I think I would completely agree with that. I think, you know, really use that first year, those first few months at university, to say yes to everything, to get involved. If you're curious about a particular student society, go along to a meeting, see how you feel. Use that time to really experiment. That is going to give you really good stuff to talk about when you are perhaps in your second year and thinking more about internships or placement years. So really think about that first year and how you might be able to make the most of it through work experience, through volunteering, through societies, through that kind of thing. And I guess maybe slightly different question now for Hannah. How competitive did you find, you know, applying for your placement year at Croda? And obviously, Francesca, feel free to chip in when thinking about AstraZeneca as well. But any advice or how can students improve their chances of being selected?
Yeah, so it is very competitive. Obviously, you're competing against everyone else that's doing a chemistry degree at all the other universities. For me, I think I kind of took a different tack to I'll kind of explain. There's two tactics you can take. So the tactic I took in terms of, I knew what I wanted in a placement year. So I knew that I wanted it to be a specific area related. So I only applied for that sort of thing because I was like, I don't think I'm going to be happy doing anything other than that. I really want to explore this as an option and hopefully, yeah, come out with an idea of my future career. So I was very specific about what I applied for. But I think what helped, what worked in my favor was that I could probably talk in my CV and my covering letter a bit more passionately than if I'd have just applied willy-nilly to all sorts of different things. Whereas other people, they did apply for everything because they were just like, I just want a placement year, I don't really mind what it's in. So they did loads and loads and loads of applications, and that's fine. Both tactic works. I've seen it work for both people, but I just knew for me, I would only be able to kind of put myself wholeheartedly into an application if I really, really wanted it. And I think that's really important because I think that comes across in your application. So it is competitive, but I think if you've got a way of kind of differentiating yourself, so be that you're really passionate or that kind of thing, it will work in your favor. What about you, Francesca, when you applied for your summer one?
Yeah, so for my summer one, I had a slight interest in pharma, but I did apply for some sort of personal care things as well, and some, you know, random things. They weren't always necessarily lab-based either. I think one thing I've definitely learned is within your application, and particularly within an interview, it's really important to be yourself, because I think it's very, very obvious when you're not, and people can pick up on that. Sometimes we have an idea of exactly what that company might be looking for, or that model candidate, but realistically you don't know what that model candidate is. And so the best thing is to read the job description, kind of highlight sort of what their key buzzwords are or what their key attitudes are, and kind of see how that relates to yourself, and then get that across in your application or your interview.
Definitely. And I think to add to that, don't worry, there's a lot of support when you're at university with all of this. So as a student at Newcastle University, you've got access to use our career service. We've got online resources. We do lots of sessions within the curriculum within chemistry, but equally you can book one-to-one appointments with us to get things like your CV checked. We offer one-to-one interview coaching, feedback on application forms, advice on navigating all the different aspects of the recruitment process, advice on where to find opportunities as well. So you'll have access to that throughout your studies, and that one-to-one support is always available to you to help you navigate all of this as well. Coming towards the end of the session now, so we've got a couple of questions in the chat that I'm probably going to combine. Josh and Ethan, I'm just going to combine your questions. So I'm going to ask both of you potentially quite a tough question actually from Ethan. So Joshua is asking, how did you both find the transition from university to work? And to add to that, Ethan's wondering, where do you see yourself in 10 years time? That $1 million question. So perhaps Francesca, I'll come to you first.
Okay, so transition from uni to industry, I think having that summer placement definitely helped, because it gave me a little temporary taster. I found it, well, obviously, so I started industry in September 2020, so it was in the middle of a pandemic, so that makes things 10 times harder. But I honestly felt that everyone was so welcoming, and obviously you're not expected to know everything on the first day. It would be impossible. I've been there 2 years and I still couldn't tell you everything about the company, and I don't think anyone can. And so, building relationships with people, kind of having those good working relationships, asking questions, all of that, and just immersing yourself in that sort of industrial culture is really how you learn. In terms of where I want to be in 10 years, I can tell you what I'd like the role to involve. So I've really enjoyed kind of project managing this sustainability initiative at the minute. So I'd quite like to potentially pursue some sort of project management role within still the chemicals industry or sector. And then relationship building. So that kind of, how do you bring different people together, either externally or within the same company? So how do you bring technical and commercial and marketing and, all of those different people together that make something, that deliver something towards one kind of key goal? So I don't know, take that how you will. But
No, fantastic. It sounds like you've got quite a clear idea actually about where you want your career to go, regardless of where that might be and what kind of organisation. Hannah, how about you?
So in terms of the transition from uni to industry, I really enjoyed it. I loved being in industry. I think what I found is at uni, you're doing everything for you. And that's fine, that's great. You're doing it to get a degree for yourself. But I think in industry, you're doing things for other people. And I think it's just me as a person. I enjoy that. Like, doing things for other people drives me much more than doing something just for myself. So I think that's what I really liked about moving into industry. In terms of in 10 years' time, well, who knows? Like, I had obviously a crazy curveball and going to the US, so that could happen in 10 years again. I don't know, but I think I'd love to manage people. I definitely would hopefully see that in the next 10 years. Maybe obviously my role at the minute is kind of less personal care kind of related. I've kind of stepped kind of a bit back from that because it's more of a central role, so maybe moving a bit more back into that would be quite nice. I think I get quite a lot of job satisfaction out of that, but actually what the role is, I've got absolutely no idea, but I'm also honestly fine with that. I think what Alabama showed me is you just have to take these things and run with them, and things will work out, life will work out. So please don't put any pressure on any of yourselves about knowing what you want to do, where you want to go, because it will just work out. And yeah, just be comfortable in the unknown.
Thank you, Hannah. Fantastic advice from both of you there, and I would wholeheartedly agree. You don't need to know what you want to do when you start university. We work with lots of graduates who still don't know what they want to do. Probably lots of people within our office still don't know what they want to do. So, you know, there is lots of time to sort of figure this out, and there are lots of tools at your disposal as a Newcastle student to help you gain experience and to help you get that training you need to be able to talk about those experiences with employers. So we're coming towards the end of the session now. Before we finish, I've got one final question to ask our panelists today. So thinking about your time at university and your own career, what one piece of advice would you give to our partner students that are here today? Perhaps, Hannah, I'll come to you first this time.
I feel like we've said it already, but I can't reiterate it enough. Just say yes. Like, honestly, the word yes has opened so many doors to me that I never would have thought would be open. So that is my one piece of advice through my placement year, through my career at Croda, through university. Just say yes, because you never know where it's going to lead, and you'll be really thankful that you did.
I feel like that should be a hashtag on our social media accounts or something. Just say yes. How about you, Francesca?
So similar, but I would say one thing someone said to me recently is you're the only person in charge of your own career. So same with, university. So obviously all of you here today are here because you've applied. So you're proactive in that sense. So keep that proactivity throughout university, whether you choose to do, a PhD, whether you choose to go into industry, whatever it is you choose, you're in charge of it.
Brilliant. I think we both, we need to employ you both here in the university's career service. Thank you so much, Francesca, Hannah, for your honest, candid insights and for sharing your experiences with our partner students today.